Hello, Sunshine. I'm ALEXI LALAS, and welcome to the State of the Union podcast, where we look at the beautiful game on and off the field through the lens of red, white, and blue-colored glasses. This week, we'll be talking, of course, MLS Cup final. It is done. It is dusted. We have a champion. We'll be talking all about our trip to Columbus, Ohio. We'll be talking about Champions League. The Sweet 16 is out. Some tasty matchups there. I'll be talking about Jordan Morris and possibly him being on the move. Our good friend Stuart Holden's going to make the show. We're going to be talking about him, actually. We're talking about Eric Rudolph and Richard Jewell and so much more. But first, joining me, as always, my friend, my colleague, my guiding light, David Mosse, a soccer savant and a Fox Soccer researcher and writer extraordinaire. Mosse, how are you on this Monday, December 14th in the year 2020?
I am doing well. I must say, I considered wearing that same hard hat for this podcast, but then I thought it might be a little too cheesy, and that has never been a concern for you, my friend, so you went all in with it. But I do have that same hard hat that you're sporting right there.
You want cheese? This is where you come, my friends. I will give it to you, all right? Fromage. Yes, so not bury the lead here, we went to Columbus this past weekend, and we'll talk a little bit more about our trip as we get into the MLS Cup Roundup. But we did get a tour of their new stadium, and they gave us these wonderful, shiny crew hard hats here. So I thought that I would wear it in honor of the champion Columbus Crew and what's coming later. And we'll talk more about that in a second. Mosse, have you watched anything or seen anything, listened to anything lately that tickles your fancy?
Not really.
Really?
I must say, my 2020 might be done on that front. Now, did you, by chance, listen to the Hollywood Con Queen podcast I recommended last
I have
week?
yet to listen to that, but I will. It is in my list. I have it written down, and I will. And when I do, we will have an engaged type of conversation. I watched on Netflix Manhunt: Deadly Games. Do you know what this is, Mosse?
I do not.
All right. So I think it's the 10-episode docudrama that focuses on and around the bombing of Centennial Park back in 1996 during the Olympics, and the prosecution, if you will, of Richard Jewell. And there's almost two stories going on. Also, the chase and the capture of fugitive Eric Rudolph, and they both intertwine for a number of different reasons. Now, this isn't the Clint Eastwood Richard Jewell movie. This is a 10-episode thing. It actually aired a while ago on CBS, if I'm not mistaken, but now it's on Netflix, and you can binge it from start to finish. There is there's that TV element when you see something that's done that's just, you can't quite put your finger on it, but it just feels TV-esque relative to film. And I know it's blurred nowadays, but it doesn't make it any less interesting or compelling, but you can tell that this was a made-for-TV type of situation. But I recommend it. It was really interesting. It almost could have been those two movies. The Richard Jewell story, who was the security officer who was at the Centennial Park back in the Olympic Games when the bomb went off, who was eventually charged and falsely charged with being the bomber. Who ended up being the bomber was this crazy guy, Eric Rudolph, who set up a bunch of bombs and then camped out for a number of months and up in the hills there. And so they're chasing him the story focuses on the chase of Eric Rudolph, but also the ultimate exoneration of Richard Jewell. So I recommend that. I was actually at the Olympics in 1996 when that happened. We were not in Atlanta because from a soccer perspective, there's satellites because it's so big. And so we were in Birmingham, Alabama, if I'm not mistaken. But I vividly remember we were all given pagers back then. Nowadays, we would have given phones, but we were given pagers. And I remember vividly the information, because there was a news that would come out on the pager. I remember the information coming out about the bombing on our pagers. That was also the summer and the time when TWA went down out of JFK. And so these are what I associate. I just remember looking down on these pagers and seeing it scroll through about the bombing. And so it shook literally and figuratively everything that went on in the Olympics. And it's a fascinating story about the mistakes that were made along the way and the difficulties and challenges along the way, as everything was brought to bear to figure out who did this, why, and then ultimately capture the person. So I can't recommend it highly enough. It kept my attention for all 10 episodes. Mosse, anything else you want to say?
No, that's it.
All right, let's get right into it, right? I mean, we returned from Columbus for both of us this past week. It was the first time that we were on the road. We mentioned the trip to Seattle that we had for the Western Conference Finals. And was it as surreal for you getting on an airplane again for the first time and going to Columbus?
It was. I will say the one silver lining of this whole ordeal is that airplanes are now a lot more spacious than they used to be. I had an entire row to myself on the flight there.
Yeah. And as I said last week, everybody was wonderful. Everybody bends over backwards to make sure that you're accommodated and to keep things as safe and clean as possible with all the different protocols that were happening. All right, so we went to Columbus for MLS Cup. Columbus Crew hosting the Seattle Sounders. All right, Mosse, let's do a big picture type of thing. For those that don't know, Columbus Crew won their MLS Cup 3-0 against Seattle. Completely dominating performance. There was never any question from the first whistle as to who was going to ultimately win that game. It was comprehensive, as I said, from start to finish. Well-deserved. Seattle was not even close to being in it. There were a couple moments that they had, but it certainly didn't even come close to representing the Seattle that we have known. And that's a credit to what Columbus did. General thoughts first before we dive in a little bit.
Yeah, incredible performance by Columbus. They were dealt a gut punch on the eve of this match with two of their best players, Darlington Nagbe and Pedro Santos, being ruled out because they tested positive for COVID. Caleb made a big call starting the kid, Aiden Morris, youngest starter in MLS Cup history, third youngest player in MLS Cup history behind only Freddie Adu and DeMarcus Beasley, and he played great. They played great, as you mentioned. First half, they were completely dominant, should have been up more than 2-0 at the break. Seattle, as we suspected they would, came out a little better in the second half, had some chances, put up a little bit of a fight, but Columbus always seemed to be in control to me, and then Zella Ryan completely killed off the game with that third goal. So completely deserved by Columbus. Hats off to them.
And hats off to Caleb Porter. And you know, Caleb Porter is such an interesting character, and he probably admittedly rubs people the wrong way at times. He can appear overly confident. I call it a beautiful arrogance, and I love it. I love that he is unapologetic. I love that he takes it all personally and kind of wears that on his sleeve. I love that he thinks even about himself in the context of what is happening in a team game. Like I said, sometimes that type of attitude and character and personality rubs some people the wrong way, but there's no denying the fact that Caleb Porter is a winner. This is a person who won in Portland and now has won in Columbus and could have been the coach of the Los Angeles Galaxy. We remember not too far back when he was in that process after he took a little sabbatical of looking, by the way, he also won at the collegiate level, of looking at places to go. He was courtside at a Lakers game, getting wooed by the Los Angeles Galaxy, and he decided to go to Columbus, and that has certainly paid dividends after a couple of years there. You mentioned the fact that he was down a couple players, including what I feel is the most technically gifted American soccer player in Darlington Nagbe, not being there, especially for a relief valve, and it didn't skip, didn't miss a beat. Just continued on, put in Aiden Morris, who is a homegrown player who just a few years ago, and we'll get into the Save the Crew situation, was at the stadium watching his team, trying to save his team as a young youth player, now finds himself starting and starring and winning an MLS Cup. So from a Columbus perspective, this couldn't have gone any better.
And Caleb becomes the third manager to win MLS Cup with multiple clubs, joining Bruce Arena and Sigi Schmidt, who Sigi Schmidt was kind of looming very large over this final because he was a link between these two franchises. He obviously coached Columbus to the MLS Cup crown in 2008 and then left after that season to take over the expansion Sounders and really laid a lot of the groundwork for all the success that Seattle's had the last few years under Brian Schmetzer. But yeah, I mean, a couple things for me. There's a lot of talk in world football right now about the traditional number 10 becoming extinct. And he's alive and well in MLS. The last couple of playoff games we did, you had these wonderful number 10 matchups. You had Lodero against Reynoso in the Western Conference Final, and then you had Lodero against Zelarayan in MLS Cup. And particularly, I know I bang this drum a lot, but Argentinians, it's amazing the stamp that they've put on this league through the years. You have Zelarayan winning MVP here, 2 goals and 1 assist. The last time Columbus won MLS Cup in 2008, Guillermo Barros Schelotto was the MVP. The last time MLS Cup was held in Columbus in 2015, Portland won it. Diego Valeri was the MVP. You had Federico Higuain on the Columbus side that day. We did MLS's back earlier this season. Portland won it. Who was the MVP there? Sebastian Blanco. It just goes on and on and on. I know John Strong traces it back to Javier Morales, who, of course, led RSL to MLS Cup in 2009. And whoever you trace it back to, it's just been this incredible lineage over the years where these talented Argentinians have really put their stamp on MLS.
And it's also, take for example, Zelarayan. There is an expectation and a higher level of pressure that comes with the designated player tag. And Zelarayan, when he was playing in Mexico, he wasn't a big star, and he wasn't even necessarily playing every single game. And the adjustment that he's had to go through, where they have brought him in, paid him big money, give him the designation to transition to be that leader and to not only accept that pressure, but welcome it and live up to it. That's something that's important too. Everybody recognizes that this isn't a vacation. You are coming there because MLS teams have identified you as better than what exists, and you are coming there to be a star. And if you do that, not only will you get paid more, but your profile will increase, and you may parlay it into something bigger. And that's important. To your point, Mosse, we're seeing it time and time again. And this postseason, maybe more than any other postseason, we demanded that the designated players step up, and more often than not, they did. Now, on the Seattle side, both Columbus mitigated it, but I think Nicolas Lodero did not have a good game, and the DPs did not show up on the Seattle side. How much of it is that it caught up to them? Because Seattle has not been great through the playoffs, and they had to pull it out of their what during the playoffs. How much of it is that we actually saw what usually happens at the worst possible time? Everything coming home to roost and encapsulated when they went to the well, it was empty, maybe for the first time in the playoffs. And how much of it is Columbus was just really, really good?
Seattle was found out a little bit. They beat an LAFC team in round 1 that was missing some key players and was kind of there for the taking that day. But then after that in the playoffs, they really didn't play that well against Dallas, didn't play that well against Minnesota. And so you could argue that this was coming, it was going to catch up with them eventually, like you said. Give Columbus loads of credit, of course, but also maybe the 2020 version of Seattle was not quite as good as we thought they were.
All right, to tie up the Seattle situation, right now, yes or no, is Brian Schmetzer the Seattle Sounders coach come next year?
I could look like an idiot, but I just have a feeling no. I just have a feeling this would have gotten done by now. And maybe that owner feels like it's time to bring in a sexier, bigger name coach. And he was just sort of putting up with Schmetzer all these years because he kept winning. And now maybe there's an opening there because, Schmetzer is taking a little bit of grief after this match. He made some questionable lineup decisions, insisting with Alex Roldan at right back. Yep. Didn't bring Leerdam back in.
And I think that's a fair criticism.
In the midfield. His explanations were a little bit weird on why he did that. And so maybe there's just a little bit of an opening there for an owner who might be looking for an excuse to make a change anyway. And so I kind of get the sense that he might not be back, amazingly enough, which I think is crazy. I think they should bring him back, but I'm just saying what I think is going to happen.
Wow. That would be something if that happened. To your point, I do think you get the feeling that they are trying, maybe even actively trying to move on, and that this is that opening that they are looking for. It was not a good look for Seattle, but it was also not a good look for Brian Schmetzer. And I think it's completely fair to talk about the fact that the coaching decisions that he made did not result in, obviously, a win, but this was not just a loss. This was a good old-fashioned. And so I think it is fair to talk about the decisions that he didn't make. I could not find somebody that thought that he wasn't going to make changes. And he just went with the consistency and the hand that had brought him there when he had opportunities to make some changes. And, Alex Roldan is going to get picked on over on that right-hand side, but he didn't get a whole lot of help. But these are the things that matter in the biggest games. And if you're Seattle, it's ultimately about winning. Yes, it's getting there, but then it's about winning. And if you're making decisions that hamper that, hamper that achievement, well, that's a problem.
For all the dynasty talk, it's worth noting they've played in 4 MLS Cups. They've been shut out in 3 of them, and they probably should be 1-3 right now. They were very fortunate to win that 2016 one with Stephen Fry making that miraculous save, and they pretty much parked the bus that day. Toronto was the better team, but they ended up winning on penalties, and then they lose in 17 and 20 fairly comprehensively. They did win 2019, so it's they do need to step up a little bit here.
It's not a dynasty. It's not a dynasty, okay? And that's okay. It doesn't mean that they're not a great team. It doesn't mean that they haven't put together an incredible decade of excellence. It doesn't mean that most other teams would kill or die to have what they have had and the success that they have had. But it's not a dynasty, and that's okay. A couple more things before we finish up. First off, we mentioned the hat off the beginning of the show. We were fortunate enough to be given a tour of the Cumming Stadium, scheduled to open, if I'm not mistaken, Mosse, around July of 2021 in Columbus. And that in and of itself is great. It's a wonderful new stadium, downtown, sunken. So you come in actually on street level, and then the stadium goes down. It's got all the bells and whistles that you want. It's going to be one of the great stadiums in the league, both from a supporter's perspective and a television perspective. And it's going to fundamentally change the way I think the Crew is viewed locally. The ownership was wonderful to walk us through with our hard hats and boots and everything. What were your impressions of the stadium, Mosse?
Oh, it looks great. I'm excited to be back there. I have to say, though, I've been giving you and Rob Stone and John Strong a hard time the last few days over this top 25 greatest MLS players list that came out, and that I feel like there was a bit of a bias towards the past. And if we all agree that MLS is a league in the ascendancy and the level of play is going up and the level of players going up, then shouldn't that have been a bit more reflected in the list? And there should have been a few more recent players. And you guys all took that occasion to celebrate the guys that really laid the groundwork for this league. And I do have to say, Columbus winning MLS Cup at MAPFRE Stadium was sort of in keeping with that theme. This was the 25th season. So much of it was about celebrating the past. And if it had been, Atlanta United against LAFC in the fight, it would have been cool, but you would have lost a little bit of that historical thread. And there is something oddly appropriate about the fact that Columbus, an MLS original, wins MLS Cup at the league's first soccer-specific stadium in its 25th season. And I really felt that MLS history being in that city the last couple of days. And it was sort of interesting to juxtapose that with then seeing the new stadium and a franchise that is an MLS original, but also is looking towards the future and realizing that they have to, build a stadium in a different location. If they're going to generate the revenue, they need to be able to compete. So it was all kind of fascinating to me.
I'm glad you said that. It was incredibly appropriate and romantic and poetic to have it there after all that has gone on. First off, just the history that exists in that stadium. And I told the story on air about the first time that I ever saw that stadium was in a bar, and there was a soccer game going on, and it didn't occur to me that game was actually being played in the United States in an American stadium, because the sightlines to me signaled that this was a game coming from elsewhere in the world. There was that traditional type of look and feel because this was the first soccer-specific stadium. And it created all of those other stadiums and all of the history. I mean, I played there so many different times. I think about the first time that I ever saw it and the pride that I felt that this was going to be seminal and an important type of construction that was going to lead to bigger and better things. And it did. The fact that it's obsolete now after 20 some years is amazing, but it just shows how quickly we have evolved. I lost an MLS Cup there. I lost a Lamar Hunt Open Cup there. Saw so many of the different U.S.-Mexico games there and saw the women play there. It has a wonderful, wonderful history. And to have that bookend and that wonderful bow put on it. And by the way, before the game, unlike Seattle, fans were allowed in the stadium, minimal amount of fans. They told us before the game there was going to be 1,500 fans there. There's no chance that there was 1,500. I mean, by the end of that game, I don't want to put a number to it. It was incredible. They were loud. That yes, they were, as distanced as one can be in a time and a moment of revelry. There were people without their shirts on and screaming and yelling and throwing beers all over the place. So it had what all of us have been missing for so long. It had a human and a humanity there that the empty stadium situations didn't. And that was great for those people that were fortunate enough to come in, and for us to be fortunate enough to be there to end this history and the one last dance that Columbus Crew had. Because the way it looks, this is probably going to be the last game ever played there by the Columbus Crew before they move on to this new stadium that we're talking about. As I said, it was a beautiful moment, and I am happy for the people of Columbus, which gets me to the Save the Crew situation. This is all being framed, and rightfully so, in terms of what has happened there. And I will be the first to raise my hand when I say that 3 years ago, I thought the Columbus Crew were gone. They were on the brink of extinction, and I thought it was a fait accompli. And what I think or what anybody else thinks doesn't matter. Ultimately, the people of Columbus said, no, this is not over. We are not going to let it be over, and we're not going to let this team leave. And they organized, and they deserve an incredible amount of credit. And this was that culmination and that moment of celebrating, not just the fact that they were winning MLS Cup, but they were winning MLS Cup only a few short years from, as I said, being on the brink of extinction. And they brought this club back because of the passion and the emotion and the love that they have for what this club has been, what it is, and more importantly, what it's going to be with new ownership and a new stadium. And so from the bottom of my heart, and I know I go back and forth with the Columbus Crew fans over the years as I've talked about the situation, but from the bottom of my heart, I am so happy for not just MLS Cup, but for what you have done. And the future looks incredibly rosy when it comes to Columbus and the new ownership and the stadium. And congratulations on yet another MLS Cup. Any odds and ends here, Mosse, before we move on to some other stuff?
That's it.
Oh, wait, I should mention that Catherine Nesbik becomes the first woman to referee a championship match in professional men's sport in North America with her participation in MLS Cup. That's, I think that's worthy of celebration. At a certain point, it will be the norm, and it won't even merit us even talking about it. But when things happen that are historic and happen for the first time, that's a good thing. I will just, when it comes to referees, I will also, as we are kind of thanking and putting a bow on the MLS season, I will thank Pro and all of the referees out there for the work that they have done. They sacrifice and work just as hard, if not harder at times, for obviously much less money and much less attention. And they are rewarded with people criticizing them and taking them for granted. But that is the lot. That is expected. You got to have a really thick skin to be a referee. So thank you to all the referees out there, whether you're doing it at the highest level, at the professional level, or anywhere else. It's important because you have helped all of us put together a version of the game that we love in the context of 2020, which has not been easy. Before we finish this up, when it comes to the domestic game right now, we should mention that Concacaf Champions League starts again this Tuesday and Wednesday. The continuation of the longest Concacaf championship that we have seen. We got teams like Montreal and Atlanta. Some teams have played a first game. Some teams haven't played their first game, so it'll be only one game. There's a bubble going on down in Florida and Orlando. Anything to mention on that, Mosse? Because I know we're broadcasting it.
Well, the game I'm working tomorrow night, FS1, is Tigres NYCFC. And having covered Liga MX this past season, I'm actually quite well-versed on Tigres and Gignac and all that. So it'll be a fun game. And yeah, I do think the two MLS teams that caught a bit of a break here are NYCFC and Montreal, because they lost first legs at home and we're going to have to go away to try to turn those results around. And now they get that game on a neutral field. So maybe that increases their chances. Atlanta lost away to America 3-0. So they were going to be coming home for a second leg. So they perhaps get burned in this scenario, but I don't see Atlanta turning around the 3-0 against America anyway, under any circumstances. And then LAFC faced Cruz Azul. And that's the one that the quarterfinals hadn't started yet. So instead of 2 legs, that's just a one-off game in Orlando, and we'll see who goes through there. So yeah, it should be fun. Looking forward to ending the year with some CCL.
Well, the disappointment that Atlanta had from a yearly perspective, that NYCFC and LAFC had from a playoff perspective, and Montreal for that matter, gives hope here to some of these teams to kind of come back. It's a really strange thing because some of these teams have been off for a while, off in terms of being in their season. Obviously, they're playing, but there's still that opportunity that to be able to plant that flag, be it MLS or be it US or Mexico or Canada, to be that first team in its current form. Obviously, we know previously MLS teams have won it, but it was a very different type of tournament back then. So we'll look forward to seeing what's happening with that as we put as I said, we put a bow on the MLS season, a season like no other, in a year like no other. I do submit and maintain that the 2 things that people are going to remember when it comes to 2020 are the MLS bubble in Orlando and the MLS's back bubble and what that was and the unique aspect of that. And then who ultimately won MLS Cup. So in this case, it would be the Columbus Crew, more so than other years because of the unique and special and unprecedented type of situation that we had. And I want to give thanks and credit and respect to all of the men and women who, from the moment that this crisis started, have worked their asses off to give us this game. We are incredibly lucky to have been given a season in Major League Soccer. And whether it's the bubble or then the completion of the regular season or then the ability to complete an MLS playoffs with an MLS Cup final, everybody working very, very hard in very, very strange and difficult and challenging situations to give us what ultimately is a luxury. Because we all know sports are a luxury. So, here's to better things going forward in the new year. We don't know when MLS ultimately is going to start because we don't really know what the next year looks like. But MLS lost a lot of money, as did a lot of businesses out there. And we hope that 2021 is better, more consistent when it comes to the schedule that's played. Obviously, no bubbles. And as we mentioned, hopefully a time when we can have those beautiful settings where people are actually back into the stadiums, whether it's old stadiums or whether it's new stadiums, to have the people back in the stadiums yelling and screaming and cheering and experiencing MLS from a live standpoint. We can't wait for that. All right, Mosse, we're going to take a little break.
One last
oh,
thing.
He's got something. Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
I had a lovely weekend in Columbus. I might get my Michigan alumni membership revoked for saying that, but everybody was super nice. And I have to say, I could sense the profound disappointment that the Ohio State-Michigan game didn't take place this year. You could tell how much that city looks forward to that game every year. And yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate. 2020, man. I mean, what can you say? But I was talking to people at the hotel and cab drivers and all that. And yeah, you could really feel it.
It is. It's hard sometimes from the outside. We understand how big it is, how big college football is from the outside. But when you are in it, like you said, it impacts and infects in a good way absolutely everything. And to take away, in particular, that game in that moment, you could. People were at a loss and hurt. But we gave them something else with the ability. I mean, I came into the lobby of the hotel and immediately looked at the young man who was working the front desk. I said, "Congratulations!" And he was very, very excited because ultimately, whether you like soccer or not, everybody loves a winner. Everybody loves a champion. And if that champion represents your city, in this case Columbus, you're going to celebrate that, and celebrate they did. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we will have our European Roundup. Don't go anywhere. All right, we're back, and it's time for our European Roundup. All sorts of stuff happening over there in Europe, including, all right, Mosse, Sweet 16. We have our 16 when it comes to Champions League. Now, you want to just kind of go through all the matchups? Now, keep in mind, this is not starting back up until what, February?
Correct.
So we got a long time. All sorts of stuff can happen, but we're still going to look at the matchups and give you what we think are some of the tastier ones, at least from a December 14th, 2020 perspective. But we all know things change with injuries and coaching changes and the transfer window and all sorts of stuff. All right, Mosse, you want to start reading them off?
Well, this is me going top of my head. Because
no. Okay, then I got it. Let me do it. I'll do it for you, and I'll get your reaction.
I could have done it.
No. Oh, okay, now you want to show off, right? Is that what? No. I'm going to do it. Here. All right. So first up, Gladbach versus Man City. Thoughts?
Oh, we're going individually, huh?
Yeah, let's do that. But just do quickly. Not long thoughts, Mosse. Just big.
City clearly the favorites, but I wouldn't put it past Pep to overthink that first leg in Germany and come back with a loss and then have to turn it around in the Etihad, which would be very tense for them. So City the favorites, but I give Gladbach a puncher's chance.
Not very sexy though matchup. This isn't the one with the allure for me. All right, and yes, I would pick Man City too. All right, Lazio, Bayern Munich.
This is the one matchup where I would be completely flabbergasted if the favorite didn't win. I mean,
so this is this is the mismatch for you.
Yeah, this is the biggest mismatch. Every other one, you do find other matchups where there's a clear favorite, but the favorite is just flaky enough, or the underdog is just frisky enough where I wouldn't say it's a complete 100% banker. This one is 100% banker to me. I can't see a world where Lazio eliminates Bayern Munich, with all due respect.
I can't either. Atletico, Chelsea.
It's interesting. Right?
That's the next one. Yeah.
This was a throwback to the days when it made a big difference whether you finished first or second in your group in terms of getting an easier matchup in the round of 16. Because UEFA, they changed the way the pots are determined for the group stage draw. And so the domino effect of that is in the last 2 or 3 years, it sort of mitigated the difference between finishing first and second in your group. But this season, you did feel there was a difference. You looked at the pot 1 teams, you looked at the pot 2 teams, and you said, oh, wow, the group winners are much stronger, and you want to be in that group so you don't have to face those teams, and you can face one of these pot 2 teams. Although this was the one instance where it didn't play out that way, because Chelsea and Sevilla were in the same group. They both quickly clinched around the 16 berth. So it just became a question of who would finish first, who would finish second. Chelsea ended up finishing first thanks to that 4-0 win in Spain, Giroud scoring the 4 goals. And you thought, okay, they must have set themselves up better for the round of 16. But lo and behold, they draw Atletico Madrid while Sevilla draw Dortmund. So I would argue Sevilla actually got the better draw despite finishing second in the group. So yeah, this is a very tough draw for Alex Dowd's Chelsea. I like this Atletico Madrid team a lot. This is like at best a toss-up for Chelsea, and you could even argue Atletico are slight favorites here.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Atletico too. I didn't have Chelsea coming out of the group, so eventually it's got to come good, right? And I'm not. It's not that I don't like Chelsea. Obviously, I love watching Chelsea, especially because of. Not obviously, but I do love watching Chelsea, but especially because of Christian Pulisic, who may or may not be on the field. we don't know how that goes from game to game. But yeah, I think okay. All right, so you're going to go with Madrid too, right?
Yeah. Again, I mean, these predictions.
Exactly, and they're going to change as we go on. But your initial one is to go with.
Yeah, if these games were held right now, I guess.
Okay. Leipzig versus Liverpool.
Fantastic. Really looking forward to this. And Klopp against Nagelsmann. I like this Leipzig team. They've dealt with the loss of Timo Werner better than I thought they would. So this is a dangerous matchup for Liverpool. I'll pick Liverpool, but it's not with a lot of conviction. It would not shock me if Leipzig took them out.
We should probably mention that we were coming on the air and Gerard Houllier passed away. And so, such a huge influence out there in the coaching world, and the impact that he has made, both directly and indirectly, is undeniable. And so rest in peace to one of the greats. Okay. So you're going to go with who? Liverpool, right?
Liverpool. Yeah.
Okay. I will also go to Liverpool. All right. We haven't deviated yet. Porto, Juventus.
Yeah. Juventus, firm favorites here, but I don't say it's 100% banker, because they got knocked out by Lyon at this stage last season. They went out to Ajax 2 years before that. They've been just flaky enough recently in the Champions League, and even flaky enough a little bit this season, struggling against teams like Benevento. And I thought Porto actually looked pretty good in the group stage, finishing second to City in their group. So Juve, solid favorites, but I'd give Porto a puncher's chance.
If just in a big if Pogba were to go to Juventus, would he be ineligible to play in Champions League?
UEFA did away with that.
Nothing. All right, so he's okay. All right, good. All right, so and that has been bandied about as a potential, which obviously would not, well, not obviously, but it might not be great for Weston McKennie, but I digress. Okay, so I'm definitely going with Juventus.
Although Weston McKennie is be tough to get out of the lineup at this point, the way he's playing. And let me stop there for a second. I mentioned the whole finishing first versus second in your group, and how in the case of Chelsea, Sevilla, it didn't matter that much.
Right.
In the case of Juventus, it did matter. Barcelona and Juventus went into that matchday 6 clash at Camp Nou, both having qualified. The only thing that was up in the air there was who would finish first, who would finish second, and you thought Barcelona were in great shape because they had beaten Juve 2-0 in Turin, and head-to-head is the first tiebreaker. So Juve had to beat them by a better score than that. Well, lo and behold, they did. They go in there, they win 3-0. Ronaldo scores twice from the penalty spot. I'm told Weston McKennie also scored in that game. I don't know because all I saw was the Sports Center highlights of it.
Oh.
So Juve end up finishing first in the group. Barca dropped down to second, and you wonder, okay, is this going to make a big difference with the draw? Well, it did, because Juve drew Porto and Barca drew PSG, which we're going to get to in a minute. So there's a case where the first versus second thing was really significant.
Okay, so you're going with Juventus.
Yeah.
I am going with Juventus too. And now we get to, as you mentioned, I think the biggest matchup and the one that is most interesting and enticing, which is Barcelona and PSG. PSG perennial failures as they go for the Holy Grail and unable to attain it, and Barcelona in a year that continues to look like this is Barcelona in name only. Where do you come out on this one, Mosse?
Well, you mentioned PSG's Champions League failures. The most spectacular of them all was in 2017 against Barcelona when they won the first leg 4-0 in Paris and then lost 6-1 at Camp Nou, the biggest second leg turnaround in Champions League history. And you might remember the Barcelona player who really was the catalyst for that second leg comeback was Neymar, who then turned around a few months later and left Barcelona that summer to go to PSG for 222 million euros, which remains the biggest transfer in history. So this is the first matchup between these two teams since then. Neymar obviously is going to be the big story, but amazingly enough, this matchup is occurring against the backdrop of all these rumors now of Messi potentially going to PSG. And Sid Lowe even half joke today, but there was a little bit of seriousness to it. He said, I wonder which team Messi will be playing for come February, because, there is this thought that, if Messi lets Barcelona know that he's definitely leaving at the end of the season, why not try to cash in January and get some money for him? And if PSG are now at the front of the line of teams he might go to, but let's say that doesn't happen and Messi is on Barcelona. Yeah, this is a really interesting one. Look, there are some heavyweights there were some heavyweights in pot one that Barcelona in their current state, I think absolutely could not beat. Teams like Bayern and Liverpool. PSG, I would not put in that category. I think PSG are the better team. I think they're favorites here, but they're just flaky enough themselves. They've been a bit all over the place this season. Tuchel can't get the tactics right. They're kind of relying on just the individual quality of their players. And, we know the way they're snake bitten with injuries in the Champions League. So let's see if come February, Neymar and Mbappe are even healthy and playing. And so there's a lot of uncertainty hanging over this matchup. I would lean PSG, but it's not with a lot of conviction. This is actually like Barcelona, even in their current state, this is a team where I could see them beating over 2 legs.
I'll go with Barcelona. All right. If you're going to lean PSG, then I'll go with Barcelona. But yes, this is the one that immediately you're attracted to for all of the reasons that you mentioned. Okay. Sevilla and Dortmund. Dortmund on the heels of firing Lucien Favre. But by the time that this game rolls around, whoever is newly installed will have had a little time to.
Although it sounds like they're just going to go with an interim manager the rest of the season.
Okay, but that's still a little time to do what they need to do. It's not as if you got to turn around and play the game the next week.
Yeah, again, if assuming Haaland is back and healthy, I think just on talent alone, I would lean Dortmund. But this is a pretty even one. I think Dortmund are only slight favorites.
And then the final one, Atalanta versus Real Madrid. I'm going with Real Madrid.
Atalanta, not the same Atalanta from last season. And I think Real Madrid are solid favorites here. But I won't say like Bayern, Lazio level favorites, only because Real Madrid have been a bit flaky. They lost twice to Shakhtar in the group stage. They had some bad results in La Liga, just lost to Alaves. So, they're not 100% reliable either. So I give Atalanta puncher's chance there.
Okay, so that's Champions League. Let's quickly touch on a couple other subjects before we start to go around from a club perspective and the leagues that are going on. Best FIFA men's player 2020: Messi, Ronaldo, Lewandowski. Who you got?
All right, this is going to be Lewandowski all the way.
Wait, is it because you think that's what it's going to be, or that's what you would vote for?
Both. Okay. Yeah, there's actually some hand-wringing over Messi and Ronaldo being finalists here. Some people think that those guys are starting to get into these things based on reputation, particularly Messi. Although his numbers, if you look at him, still stack up. The optics are a little weird given everything that's going on with him right now. And I know people feel like maybe a De Bruyne or somebody like that had a better case. In Brazil, people were actually pretty upset that Neymar didn't get into this final three, which somewhat surprised me. I mean, Neymar, right now, I do think probably has the highest ceiling of any player in the world, meaning like on his best day, when he's completely healthy, his best game is probably better than anybody else's best day. And he demonstrated that a few times through 2020, but still, he didn't have a year top to bottom that was worthy of being crowned with one of these awards. Between injuries and the French league shutting down, he still played very few games, much fewer than any of these other contenders. And he didn't win a trophy outside of France. Obviously came close with the Champions League, but they lost in the final. He was poor against Bayern. So I'm surprised that Brazilians built this up in their heads that this was going to be the year that he was finally going to be crowned with one of these awards. I never saw that happening. Didn't surprise me at all. He wasn't in the final three. I do think this year was important for him because he was sort of flirting with becoming irrelevant there. And 2020 was a year when Neymar kind of reminded everybody how talented he is and kind of set himself up for maybe if he can stay healthy, and more on that later on the podcast, maybe the next couple of years is when he can really sort of capture one of these awards. But I never thought it was going to be 2020. So I was a bit surprised by the reaction of my countrymen.
For those that don't vote for Lewandowski, I really am interested to hear what their justification is for that. I agree with you that I think it is a no-brainer. Remember 2 years ago when what was his name? Luka. What was his name? Still is his name. Luka Modric. Had that shining moment, and there was this talk about how it wasn't that he's not good. I mean, he's a great player. But it was that people were getting sick and tired of voting for the usual suspects. And so therefore, this was something new. I don't look at Lewandowski in the same way, and certainly not where we are right now. This is completely, and it's not that Modric wasn't justified in getting the attention, but I think that you're going to have a real hard time justifying voting for anybody but Robert Lewandowski.
I agree. And by the way, on the manager front, I told you a couple weeks back that people were upset about Bielsa making the top five. Well, he's now made the top three. The three finalists there are Bielsa, Hansi Flick, and Jurgen Klopp. I suspect Flick or Klopp will win it. But still, Marcelo Bielsa in the mix, top three managers of the world in 2020.
It's if you sit on a bucket and you act a little crazy, it's people might at some point mistake it for genius. I'm not saying he's not a genius, okay? Crazy like a fox. All right, listen, let's take a real quick whip around all the leagues here. I don't want to focus on all the results or anything like that. Maybe just some things that jumped out. We can start over in the Premier League where Arsenal going to Arsenal, right? I mean, it's these stops and starts where you think, okay, you're turning a corner. Okay, it's a new leaf. Oh, okay, this is finally, we're getting back to where we were. And then yet we find ourselves here on December 14th of 2020 with an Arsenal that has lost 4 straight games, and the sky is either falling again or just continuing a rapid fall. What's going on, Mosse?
Yeah, this was a remarkable weekend in the Premier League. None of the big six won. United and City played to this drab 0-0 draw at Old Trafford. Tottenham were held to a 1-1 draw away to Crystal Palace. Liverpool held to a 1-1 draw away to Fulham. Chelsea lost 1-0 away to Everton. And then, as you mentioned, Arsenal lose 1-0 at home to Burnley. They have now dropped 7 of their 12 Premier League games this season. They are mired in 15th in the table. It is absolutely extraordinary what's going on there. Arteta... Oh, what is this? Jeff Hernandez? 4 straight home league games. Why? Did you say something different?
I might have said something. 4 straight home games. Oh, league games. I guess.
I don't know.
That's all right. He's new.
So
he's new,
in any
Austin.
event,
I said 4 straight games. Sorry, 4 straight home league games. Excuse me. When we're talking about the horribleness, if that's a word, of Arsenal, we want to make sure that we're correct in terms of how horrible they are.
Arteta, I don't think they're going to want to make a change, another change here. And I guess he's shown just enough promise. He won the FA Cup that they're going to stick with him a little bit longer, but he's got to turn things around here. I mean, this is just embarrassing. There's no other way around it.
So you think that, but they're down the Arteta road too far for them to say, hey, we made a mistake here.
Yeah, I think they're going to hang with him a little bit longer.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? I mean, that's something that you want, unless you really messed up the calculation and have found out that in reality, the emperor has no clothes, right? All right. Anyway, okay. Anything else Premier League wise, Mosse?
No, that's it.
All right. Serie A over there. Cristiano Ronaldo just scores goals. His Juve career, 79 goals, 19 assists in 100 games. Now, look, he plays for super clubs. He plays for teams that you're going to have plenty of the ball. And as a goal scorer, you're going to get opportunities. But ultimately, you still got to be able to put them in. And nobody has done it better than him. Although, when it comes to Serie A, the old man's still kicking, with Zlatan keeping pace with Ronaldo in terms of the leading scorers over there. How much attention should we focus on Cristiano Ronaldo, or how much attention should we focus on Zlatan for what he's doing? I feel like if there is a case, it's not that Zlatan doesn't get attention, but what he's doing is pretty amazing.
No, absolutely. But to hop back to Ronaldo for a second, both goals were from the penalty spot. Dybala got the other one. So Juve beat Genoa 3-1. Inter beat Cagliari 3-1. They're actually trailing 1-0, scored 3 times in the last 15 minutes. And then Milan held to a 2-2 draw by Parma. So their lead gets shaved a little bit. Milan now 3 points up on Inter, 4 points up on Juve. So starting to tighten a little bit there in Serie A. So I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be an exciting 3-team race.
So you mentioned that Ronaldo scored 2 penalties. Are you of the opinion that penalties should be, like I believe, a different column, and that they are not necessarily indicative of how great a goal scorer you are?
Well, I'll tell you who thinks that. Opta, which is the service we use for all our stats, because they always qualify it as non-penalty goals. How many?
Yes, as they should. I am 100% on board with that. As everybody knows, when I do my end of the year MVP, it's always about goal scorers, and I separate it out. It's not that there's not value to scoring penalties, okay? And it's not that it doesn't take skill or nerve to be able to do that, and you want people that are able to do that, but in a situation where 80% of the time the ball goes in the back of the net, or whatever the percentage is, I just think it's so completely different, and it can shade and color and obscure what the actual player is. And that's not to take anything away from Cristiano Ronaldo. Ultimately, he's going to get, he's going to be looked at as one of the great goal scorers. But to your point, they were penalties. Would you rather have Cristiano Ronaldo or Zlatan?
On my team?
Yeah.
Oh, Ronaldo.
Oh, okay. Well, all right. Wow.
I have to say, our new producer, Jeff Hernandez, might have led you astray here. Zlatan is injured, didn't play this weekend. He's been out for several games. I don't know why we're making Zlatan a topic this weekend.
Because he's still one of the leading scorers in Serie A.
I'll have a talk with young Jeff.
So you don't think we should talk about Zlatan for what he's done?
European weekend review.
Oh my gosh! You know what happens when you count out Zlatan? You know what happens when you? I would say insult him here. He hears about it, and he will make you.
Seen that little list of Zlatan rules that someone put together? No. It's these funny little Zlatan things. Like a couple of them that make me chuckle is when Zlatan was in school, teachers had to raise their hands to speak to him. Another one I love is
a good one.
A policeman pulled Zlatan over for speeding. Zlatan let him off with a warning.
Those are good. All right, let's jump to La Liga. Anything stand out to you? Messi here. On the cusp. Is he on the cusp of this record here?
Well, he gets the winner. Barcelona squeaked by Levante 1-0. And then, so he's up to 642 goals for Barcelona, according to our producer, Jeff Hernandez, who I just criticized, so I'll give him some love here. He's just one shy of Pele's 643 for Santos, which is the record for most goals for one club.
Okay. Hold on. This is where I need your Brazilian background, okay? I don't claim to know all the inner workings of Brazilian soccer, and I'm not even sure that you do, but you know a whole lot more than I do on a lot of things. So when we talk about Messi scoring, obviously he is scoring for one of the great and fortified teams in history in Barcelona. And he is afforded the opportunity, because of the talent that he has had surrounding him, to get plenty of the ball, plenty of opportunities to score, and that's reflected in the numbers. This is the proverbial super club, right? And most of the time when Barcelona walks on the field, by the amount of talent that they have, they know they are going to win. How much of a parallel is that when it comes to Pele and when he was scoring all the goals for Santos, in terms of how good they were? I know that they are and were a super club, but relative to the Barcelona-esque type of environment, how much is it fair to compare and contrast?
No, I mean, Santos was the great Brazilian team of that era in the 60s. So, and Pele was surrounded by great players on that team too. So I wouldn't use that argument to in any way diminish what Messi's doing. I think the records are comparable.
Well, then which is more impressive?
I don't know. It's tough to say. It's hard to contextualize, what Pele did in the 60s for Santos to what Messi's done the last 15 years with Barcelona. It's
Mosse, if somebody is beating up on inferior opposition game in and game out and has a number of goals that they score, and somebody else is playing in a much more competitive and a league with much more parity, then you can look at those two. But you're telling me that they are not exactly similar, but much more similar than people realize in terms of the environment and circumstances that these players did this in.
I'd have to go back and look at the level of competition in some of those early 60s Paulista state championships to gauge how they compare to the Valladolids and Celta Vigos of the world.
I think either way, it's impressive in terms of the numbers.
But I mean, let's not bury the lead on La Liga here. I've been talking up Atletico Madrid. They had what almost was a match point this weekend. I mean, if they had gone in there and beaten Real Madrid, the lead would have been, I know it's early in the season, but quite insurmountable. Instead, it goes the other way. Real Madrid played them off the field. They beat them 2-0. So Real Madrid able to cut into that lead. So La Liga got a lot more interesting this weekend. And Real Madrid, Zidane was in a bit of trouble there. And boy, they've come through with three really nice performances here against Sevilla, Gladbach, and Atletico Madrid, and have completely righted the ship there. And are
little
now
engine that could. Well, they're okay, Mosse. All right, Bundesliga, Mosse. We mentioned earlier that Lucien Favre was sacked, fired.
A bit of a wacky weekend in Germany because Bayern dropped points to Union Berlin. They needed a Lewandowski equalizer even to salvage a draw there. Leipzig did take care of Bremen. I mentioned Leverkusen last weekend. They're kind of the hidden story in European football here, and they rolled on a 4-1 win over Hoffenheim. So they are now unbeaten and in first place in the Bundesliga, 1 point above Bayern. Peter Bosch doing a phenomenal job there. And then Dortmund, they get drilled 5-1 at home by Stuttgart, which is a shame because it overshadowed an incredible Gio Reyna goal, an absolute beauty. Although on the American front, this 5-1 Stuttgart win was orchestrated by an American manager, Pellegrino Matarazzo, and it leads to Lucien Favre sacking, which could potentially open the door for another American manager, Jesse Marsh, who's been mentioned as a potential candidate there. But on the Lucien Favre thing quickly, I'm no big fan of his. I'm totally fine with them sacking him. But I do think there's a larger conversation there that needs to happen about what Dortmund are trying to be. Amazon Prime did a wonderful documentary on Dortmund. I think it's the most underrated of these team documentaries. It chronicled the 2018-19 season, which was the one where they topped the table for much of the campaign, and then Bayern pipped them at the end, came down to the very last round. And over the course of that season, they brought in Matthias Sammer as a consultant. And there was this really interesting scene where late that season, the directors have a meeting to discuss whether to sell Jadon Sancho that summer because United had made an offer. And they're sitting around talking about, well, do we sell him this summer or the next? And how much would it take to sell him now? And United offering such and such. And well, we want such and such. And at one point in the conversation, Matthias Sammer just takes a step back and says, can somebody explain to me what Dortmund are trying to be? Are we a selling club? Are we about winning major trophies? And it was a great question because I really don't, at a time in European football where it's pretty delineated who the super clubs are that you're going to judge based on their ability to win major trophies and who the selling clubs are who there's no expectations of that. Dortmund kind of float in between, to the point where a guy like Favre, again, I'm not a huge fan of his, but he could plausibly say, I finished second to Bayern both seasons, and we're only a few points off the top this season, and we got to the knockout stages of the Champions League both seasons, and we won our group this season. So what did I do wrong? What more is Dortmund aspiring to be? It's interesting.
It is, and it brings up, I think the importance of being open and honest and upfront and very public about what you are. But I know there is danger in that, because if a club the size of Dortmund comes out and says we're a selling team, and for a number of years they have trumpeted the fact that they have sold players on for incredible amounts of money that have gone on to quote unquote bigger clubs, which is fine, but you got to be able to sell that in a way that doesn't hurt your bottom line and hurt your perspective on it. And look, you can change a little bit here or there, but to your point, yeah, I think they're hurting themselves by not really articulating it out there, and it's okay. And let the chips fall where they may. I think their support is such that people will respect that and enjoy that, but it makes it difficult from the outside to really assess who people are if you don't have a clear idea and vision of what they are trying to be. And that's it. It's okay to say that. Even in this age of the super club, you don't want to pigeonhole yourself. I get that, but I think there is a power in defining yourself and providing that identity to everybody publicly. And obviously, you got to first do it internally and privately, and then you take it to the public and say, "This is who we are," and let the chips fall where they may.
And, they have more money than people think, at least pre-pandemic. They played an 80,000 seat stadium that's sold out every week. They have big sponsorship deals. When Deloitte puts out that list every year of biggest revenue generating club, they're usually in the top 15. And I've always felt like they would hold on to their players if they could, but they just haven't been able to convince players that Dortmund is a final destination. Players see it as a stepping stone, so they've had to begrudgingly accept that and adjust their transfer strategy accordingly. And so they now function as more of a selling club, and everybody oohs and ahs at the incredible profits they make. Well, they brought in Pulisic for such and such and turn around and sell him for this much, and the Ousmane Dembele they brought in for such and such and turn around and sell them for a lot more. Same thing it's going to be with Jadon Sancho and Erling Haaland. I mean, we all presume he's going to leave in a year or two. There's no notions that he's going to spend many years there. And obviously Gio Reyna eventually, we all think probably, will parlay Dortmund into the Premier League or Barcelona, Real Madrid or something bigger. And okay, that's great that you make this great profit on these transfers. But meanwhile, they've won one major trophy in the last 8 years, a German cup. I mean, excluding the German super cups they win sometimes. So I don't know. Is that a success or not? You make this great profit, but again, it gets back to what are you trying to be? Because at a quote unquote super club, one trophy in 8 years would be seen as a complete failure. Nobody would care how much of a profit you're making in the transfer market. So
no, and as a matter of fact, at a super club, the profit in those equations is secondary. But I know that's a difficult step to take, because it puts you in an echelon and in a situation that can be challenging, because ultimately at the core, these are all businesses. The way they go about their businesses, their business may be different, and their priorities when it comes to the business may be different. But like you said, it has to be articulated.
One last thing, yeah. We'll move on from this. Nothing against Jesse Marsch, but the names you're hearing is like that ilk of manager. I do wonder a club like Dortmund, if they picked up the phone and called Mauricio Pochettino or Max Allegri, what they would think. Like, is Dortmund considered a plum job, or even in the coaching front, it's more of a stepping stone job? I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah. All right. Ligue 1. Anything going on over there in Ligue 1?
Actually, quite a lot, more than usual. So I mentioned last week that there was a rare big game in Ligue 1, because Lyon, who have been very good, were going into the Parc des Princes to face PSG. Lo and behold, they win that game 1-0. So they've now leapfrogged PSG in the standings, as have Lille, who took care of Bordeaux. So it's Lille in first, Lyon in second, Rudy Garcia doing a phenomenal job. PSG are in third. And keep in mind, Marseille are only a point behind PSG, and they've played 2 fewer games. So presuming they win one of those games in hand, PSG will slip to fourth, which I know it's early, and we all think push comes to shove, PSG will eventually pull away. But I don't know. I mean, I'm starting to think maybe we might even have a race in Ligue 1. That PSG Lyon game this weekend ended in a bad way, because this Brazilian midfielder on Lyon, Thiago Mendes, A bit of a hard tackle on Neymar, who was crying and had to get stretchered off. I will say the latest there seems like good news. I mean, the way Neymar reacted, you thought, oh my God, this might be a several-monther and spoil his season. And now you're hearing it was only a sprained ankle, be out a couple weeks. So big sigh of relief there. Yeah. Thiago Mendes, the first thing I thought of, this is a really obscure reference, but there's a Brazilian named Márcio Nunes, who way back in 1985, there's a Flamengo Bangu game in the Rio de Janeiro State Championships. And this guy, Márcio Nunes, who played for Bangu, did this criminal tackle on Zico and almost ended Zico's career. Zico was out for several months. And this guy, Márcio Nunes, it like ruined his life. He got death threats after that. He became known as the guy that had that horrible challenge on Zico. And I couldn't help but think, because here's Thiago Mendes, a Brazilian. Imagine if he like seriously injured Neymar. And luckily it looks like that hasn't happened. So we can all move on with our lives.
Stay on your feet. Stay on your feet. All right. Well, we hope Neymar is okay. The problem with Neymar is that he's cultivated this image that you don't know how much credence to give when he's screaming and yelling and crying and rolling around on the ground.
Well, although his dad posted a Instagram message saying, this is another example of how we blame the victim and we don't do enough to protect players, which I know is something that you kind of agree with. I mean, there's all this hand-wringing over diving, but you kind of think that players like Neymar should be protected more, and we take for granted the fact that they get the crap kicked out of them.
No, I have no problem with what many people do have a problem with, and what it is, the diving or the embellishment. That's not the hill that I want to die on, because it doesn't change the enjoyment of the game for me. I factor it in, and I can actually appreciate it when it's done correctly. No, I can. No, I can. But to that point, though, I think that Neymar, I don't know what Mr. Neymar is, or Mr. Senior Neymar, if he were to talk to the late, great Diego Maradona about the protection that attacking and creative players are afforded in the modern game versus back 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, it is night and day. And while I do think that it's right and just and appropriate to protect players that are creative and going forward and have the ball, and that doesn't necessarily just mean attackers, that means everybody when you have the ball, there are a whole lot more protections in the game today. And those players are protected in a way unlike anything that happened in the past. Can it improve? Yeah, it'll probably improve and evolve. But some of the horror tackles and the horror way of playing that we saw in the past, that has gone away. And whether it's just the way that the game has shifted in the laws, or VAR, or just the way that we play the game, more video when it comes, more exposure. Whatever it ends up being, can you imagine some of the decisions that were made back in the day? If somebody made a decision to play like that, we would be horrified, and that player would be dealt with accordingly and immediately. And more so, I don't think players would do that. So it is, as opposed to the norm, it is an anomaly when we see something like that, where it's just an out and out hatchet type of job. That's a throwback. Okay, Mosse, shall we take another little break here? And when we come back, oh yeah, it's that time for Ask Alexi. All right, won't go anywhere. All right, welcome back. Time for Ask Alexi. Use that hashtag Ask Alexi out there, or Ask Mosse. But anyway, you send us questions, comments, concerns out there on all the social media platforms, and we pick a few each week, as we have done this week. Mosse, what do the folks want to know and discuss this week?
First up, at Coach Jose, or is it Jose, 823. While playing for the U.S. men's national team, where did you like to play the most?
Where did I like to play the most? That's interesting. I loved the Thunderdome-ish type of environment. So I actually enjoyed as much if 100,000 people were cheering for me as the game where 100,000 people are cheering against you. I loved the theater and the punk ethos of everybody against you, like in a Thunderdome-esque experience of playing down in Mexico City at Azteca, or playing at Old Saprissa Stadium in Costa Rica. Those were nuts. I loved it. all I care about is you're paying attention. Whether you like me or not doesn't really matter. So those are a couple really fun environments to play in. From a domestic perspective, look, the Rose Bowl, because of that history, it's not as Thunderdome-ish because it's a much the grade of those stands are much more gradual. It's not as straight up as I would like. Old Giant Stadium was a little better on that front. We were talking earlier about Columbus and Crew Stadium, Mapfre Stadium. It's just very intimate, which makes it fun. It doesn't have a roof. The new Columbus Stadium actually has a roof, and that makes a huge amount of difference. So, those types of environments. I will say this, with the national team, and this is something that still goes on today, it started to dissipate a little and change a little. But as a national team player, men's or women's, you recognize, mostly men's, but everyone to a certain extent, you recognize that you are going to play games in your own country where you are the away team. And it's unique. It's specific to our country and culture because of the melting pot that we are and all of the backgrounds and the histories and the affiliations with other national teams. It's expected to have happen. I actually enjoyed and loved the challenge of trying to sway fans in my own country who were coming to cheer for the opposition and or boo me. I loved that environment for some weird, perverse reason. And I wanted the chance to look them all in the eye and say, I get it. You're from X, Y, and Z. I have Greek lineage and Greek heritage. But you live in the United States, and this is your team that's representative of your country. And you're coming into the stadium and cheering for the opposition and cheering against this team that represents your country. And that's fine. I'm not going to change their minds, but I wanted to be able to look them in the eye when they are screaming and yelling. And more so when we would beat their team, quote unquote, their team. I enjoyed those moments as much as where everybody is on your side and it's red, white, and blue all through and through. And the entire place is there for you. So those are some of the places that stand out. I don't know, Mosse, do you have places in the U.S. that you really enjoy watching? I never played in the Big House, although I know they've done soccer games there. That's a good reference right there, right, Mosse? That's a good Wolverine reference.
Yeah, you just missed Mapfre because your national team career ended in 98 and right. Mapfre opened in May of 99. And yeah, I actually wrote that piece this weekend that Frankie Hajek read that ran on our pregame show. And I referred to Mapfre as like the U.S.'s fortress, which I think it has become that, dating back to that Cold War Mexico qualifier in 2001. And ever since then, I think people look at that. And so you would say the U.S. didn't have the equivalent of that in the 90s, right? There wasn't that sort of go-to place that if it's a big game, that's where we most want to play and where we're really going to feel at home. There really wasn't.
Yeah, old Foxborough Stadium was pretty good. But I mean, we so much so that we even played Mexico there. But the way that, the location and just the aura of Mapfre, Columbus Crew Stadium, that was something special. There was never any doubt that it was going to not just be a pro-U.S. crowd, but a overwhelming U.S. crowd. And any type of opposition fans were going to be not heard at all. And so that was the difference, as opposed to playing in some place like old Foxborough Stadium, where you knew you were going to have not only fans for if you're playing against Mexico, but vocal, and you would hear and see them, and they would. And so in that sense, they would matter. In Columbus, it didn't matter because it was going to be all about the red, white, and blue.
Yeah, John Strong, the first words out of his mouth on Saturday, he said, welcome to Mapfre Stadium, American soccer's equivalent of Wembley or the Maracanã. So he really bestowed that honor. Did I ever tell you, by the way, that I went to with my dad, I went to a U.S. Columbia friendly at Rutgers Stadium. Do you remember that game?
Sure, of course, because it was my alma mater. I was
sitting in the stands that day. I remember watching you play and thinking, like 20 years from now, I'm going to be hosting a podcast with this guy. I just had this.
Hey, dreams do come true, my friend.
I actually sat in the Columbia section. There were some scary looking guys.
I'll bet. Oh, that's funny. That is funny. Yeah, Piscataway, New Jersey. Oh, incredible. All right, what other questions do people have here?
Next up, I think this one will fire you up. At Sambali7. Would you like to see Jordan go to Europe? I'm assuming that's Jordan Morris.
Well, it's not Michael Jordan. Yes. All right. So this not yes to answer your question, but yes, I understand, and I'm going to assume that you're going to mean Jordan Morris, one of these stars up there in Seattle, and I would say at this point the biggest domestic playing U.S. men's national team star that we have. I have no problem if Jordan Morris decides that he wants to test himself and have that European adventure. And I also think that there will be plenty of suitors, but I want it to come from the right place. And first and foremost, it has to come from him. I don't want him to do it because he thinks that it is what he should do. I want him to do it because he believes in his heart of hearts that it is what he needs to do. I don't want him to do it because he feels out of some warped sense of responsibility that he needs to live up to what the American soccer community believes is the right path, and that somehow he's not fulfilling his destiny, or he's shirking his responsibility to American soccer by not doing that. Jordan Morris can have an incredible career. He can make plenty of money. He can be the player that people think about when it comes to Seattle Sounders. And he can play his entire career in Seattle for the Sounders. He can be one of the great players ever to play the game. He can star for not just Seattle, but the U.S. men's national team. And he can do that without ever going to Europe. I am convinced that he can. To many, if that decision is made and he never goes to Europe, as I said, he will not be looked at in the same way that we look at other players, because we associate and we equate going to Europe with better players. And that's not, in many cases, that may absolutely be the case, but it's not necessarily the case. And when a Landon Donovan or an Eddie Pope decide that they want to play their careers domestically, I believe it comes from a place where they have looked within themselves and they have an understanding of who they are, which many of us don't, but they understand who they are, and this is what they want to do. And this not only is what they believe is best for them from a soccer perspective, but from a lifestyle perspective. I have to respect that and appreciate, and I think even celebrate that, because not everybody has it. And we hear all of the success stories, and they are in the vast minority. And we don't hear all of the difficulties and the problems and the challenges. Now, look, Jordan Morris might say, you know what? It's not even about being a better soccer player. I just want to go have this experience. We've seen some of the U.S. women's national team talk about the fact that, it's just, I want to go over to Europe and live in Europe. And I can completely get on board and respect that. And even that experience, just from an experiential type of perspective, that can be beneficial. So all of that is to say to Sambali7, would you like to see Jordan Morris go to Europe? Yes, I would like to see it if that's what he wants, and only him. And I believe that he would be successful. The interesting thing is if he comes to that conclusion, what's his value? And I know there was an article this week on the in The Athletic talking about valuing somebody, because I don't think we've had a player like this, that he's not a young player that's just coming up. This is an established U.S. talent and star. And what does he fetch on that open market if he is sold? And what would that same price be if he was from Argentina and everything was the exact same thing? These are the interesting questions as to what does Jordan Morris value. I mean, if somebody came along and gave $5 million for Jordan Morris, you spit at that. Hell no. Hell no. Jordan Morris is well into double digits when it comes to the millions. At the very least, when we are talking about in the Jordan Morris, I'm looking at the teens before I even start to have a conversation. That's how valuable he is. But if it happens, as I said, I want it to be because it's something that he wants to do, and not because he's looking to satisfy what anybody else, including the American soccer community, thinks is what he should be doing. Mosse, anything on that? What do you think Jordan Morris is worth in the open market in 2020 right now?
The only thing is his age has gotten up there a little bit where he's, European clubs, they like to pay big for a younger player that they know they're going to have for, his entire prime. And Jordan, I don't know, he might have missed a little bit of the window there where he would be like,
he's 26 right now, 26. And he turned 26 in October.
Yeah. So I do think that would factor into his price a little bit. If he was the exact same player he is, but still like 21 or 22, you'd be looking at a much bigger fee than.
Fair enough. Okay. One more question here.
Yes. We'll end on a fun one.
Okay. I like fun.
Adam Tweet 96. Most annoying thing about working/traveling with Stu Holden.
All right. So those that maybe don't know out there, Stuart Holden, legendary player, and I think is well on the way to becoming a legendary broadcaster. Oftentimes the voice that you will hear over there on Fox alongside John Strong. So I was talking about traveling, and everything shut down immediately in February for me when it came to travel. And for guys like myself and Stu Holden and John Strong and Rob Stone, it was a dramatic and drastic change in our lives. And so when you travel with people on a consistent basis, as I do with someone like Stu Holden, you find out where you agree, where you disagree, where you are compatible, where you're not compatible, and you very, very quickly get into a routine. And you also recognize that in order to function on a continual basis, you have to be respectful of the fact that not everybody does things the same way. For example, I am legendary when it comes to the fact that I like to be places not just on time, but early. There are others that I travel with, including someone like Stu Holden, that does not want to do anything in terms of, quote unquote, giving time back to the man, in that the perfect situation for someone like Stu or a Rob Stone is that you get up, you get in the car, you arrive at the airport, you walk straight through security without a hitch, and you walk straight onto the plane. There is no dilly-dallying. You have been as efficient as possible, and you get onto the plane. And you have been able to sleep as long as you possibly can. I am not like that. So from a travel perspective, we can't do that. For example, I'm not getting drinks or coffee or anything like that. There is nothing leisurely about the way that I travel. There's other people, including a John Strong or a Stuart Holden, that maybe make a stop at the Starbucks or something like that. No. That's not happening. Those are just some little things when it comes to working and traveling with people, including Stu. I will say this about the work environment from a broadcast perspective. You get to know people pretty well. And ideally, they're not only doing their job, but they are good people. And I can honestly say that we work with some very, very good people. All right. They understand my idiosyncrasies, and I understand theirs. We function very, very well together. I think we have a mutual respect for the work that we do and the value that we can bring to the broadcast. But we also understand that we do things differently and to get to the same place. And we have to respect that. Just like on a team, you don't even necessarily have to like the people that you work with, but you do at the very core have to have a respect that they, when that light turns on, are going to add something to the production. And in doing so, make you and make the entire production better. I'm just very, very fortunate in this situation, whether it's Stu or any of the other people that I've mentioned, that they are not only great at what they do, but that they are good people. And we have a good time on the road. The other day after MLS Cup, some of the things that we were talking about here, those are the things that we were talking about. And it's not just soccer. Obviously, because you spend so much time with these people, you're involved in the things that they are doing, and the families and kids and wives and good times and bad times and all of those different things. And it does become your family. And just like any family, there's dysfunction. And just like any family, there's times where you butt heads. But ultimately, you're family. And so while you can scream and yell within a family, we also are very protective. And you will see how protective we are when there are attacks from the outside. So I know I veered off into a little stuff there, but that's just to give you a little idea about the way that we function as a group and ultimately as a family. And it's extended family. You know, Mosse, you were with us on the road this past weekend, and it's not just people that are in front of the camera. I mean, you only see a very small portion, a little tip of the iceberg in terms of everybody that we work with when it comes to it. And I'm going to it's a good way to end this segment, because I'm going to touch on that when we get back here after our next break for One for the Road. Anything to add, Mosse, in terms of Stu Holden or anybody else when it comes to travel stories?
No. I mean, I love Stu Holden, but I am completely with you on the whole timing of traveling thing. I mean, I couldn't believe I had a 10:55 a.m. flight out of Columbus on Sunday, and our good friend Johnny Araya was on the same flight as me, so he offered me a ride. And, when somebody offers you a ride, you can't really argue with them on the departure time. You kind of have to accept, they're nice enough to take you, kind of accept. Right. And he says, okay, we'll leave the hotel at 9:45. And I'm looking at, are you out of your mind? He still had to return the rental car. And just like you said, we walked up right as they were starting boarding, and he had this sort of satisfied look like, oh, yep, perfect timing, huh? And I'm like, no, perfect timing is when you give yourself time that what if something had happened on the road? It took longer to return the rental car, or there was a line to get through security or whatnot. You shouldn't, these people that have this compulsive need with leaving at the absolute latest they think they can leave to just get there. It drives me crazy with movies too. And people now, they disregard previews. They think, okay, 9:45 showing, so let's plan to get there at 10, and that's right when the movie will be starting. And no, wait a minute. Previews are part of the movie going experience.
Thank you, Mosse.
A movie theater on time to me is being settled in my seat with a popcorn and drink in hand as the previews are starting. That's getting to a movie on time for me. So I'm just going to get that out there.
I think that we would travel well together.
Yes.
All right. And I'm jealous. Look, I'm jealous of the people that are able to do that. The angst and the anxiety that I would feel in a situation like that. And like you said, there is, and I'll finish it here, there is that sense of accomplishment when you get on and they close the door behind you and you have timed it absolutely perfect. So there has not been one wasted moment. And I see it on their face when they celebrate that. I don't know. Anyway, Mosse, we would travel well together. There are some people out there that I think would be difficult for you to travel with, and you keep a list of them, and you take different paths, but ultimately you get, hopefully, to the place that you are both going at a certain point. You just do it in different ways. All right, we're going to take another quick break here, and when we come back, as always, you will get my One for the Road. All right, welcome back. As we do on each and every pod, I finish up with One for the Road, and it's going to be a little bit of a continuation. I talked earlier about the situation in Columbus and the finality of it, and the tying the bow on what has been, I think we can all agree, a strange and wild and at times incredibly challenging and difficult 2020 when it comes to the soccer production and the soccer world out there. I also talked a little bit about the incredible men and women that we have that you don't see on camera. And you now know David Mosse, but there's so many other people out there that enable us each and every week to provide what I think is great quality soccer coverage. And whether it's World Cup coverage, whether it's national teams, men's, women's, whether it's MLS, in the past it's been, we know over the years it's been EPL and Bundesliga and everything else in between. There are men and women that work each and every week and day to make sure that we are doing it. And it has been, as you can imagine, incredibly challenging for us. We remain incredibly proud of the product that we put out, and we have leadership that has been wonderful. We talk, sometimes we mention the name Zach Kenworthy, who has been basically our leader when it comes to what we have done from a soccer perspective over there at Fox on the ground, and the day-to-day type of leadership that he has given, including what we have done for MLS. And it is it is challenging. Now, is it challenging and difficult relative to a lot of other things out there? No. All right. We work in sports. And if anything, 2020 has made us acutely aware of the need for perspective in a time where, businesses continue to lay people off and furlough people and pay cuts and real difficulties and challenges. While this is our livelihood and we talk about soccer and sports, it is still sports. And it is not lost on us that sports, while incredibly gratifying and joyful, and in that sense important, they are still a luxury. But we are lucky that we have people like Zach and so many men and women that you don't necessarily see or know that are passionate about this game, are passionate about the broadcast of this game, and work diligently each and every day. And I could go on and list a lot of them that are important. But just know that they have my eternal respect and love for what they do, because it's not easy to make me look halfway decent, either from an appearance perspective or a content perspective. And whether it's the stuff that Mosse writes all the way to audio and everybody that is doing things day in and day out, I just want to send a thank you to all of those people that did such a great job and enabled us to look good in front of the camera on a continual basis. Mosse, anything else before we head out?
One last thing on the topic of being part of a family. We have a new producer who began today, Jeff Hernandez. So one down for him. I thought he did a nice job. The Alex Dowd era is history. The Jeff Hernandez era has begun. And unlike Alex Dowd, who didn't like joining the conversation, I could tell Jeff Hernandez is chomping at the bit to get some words in here. So
I wanted to make sure that we ended it very quickly with chirping in of Hefe. We're calling him Hefe, right? Is that okay? Are you okay with that? All right. What do you want to say to the people?
I just want to appreciate getting chewed out already. I'm looking forward to more of Mosse getting chewed out. But thankful for Dowd. Just made it a really smooth transition to get here. And I'm just really excited to get started here working with you guys.
All right. So if there are problems while you are listening and or watching to this week, you know exactly who to go to. We are but the talent in front of the camera. And as I told you, there's a lot of people behind the scenes that do great work. There's also Hefe, okay? And so you make sure that if you have any problems or criticisms or critiques of what has happened, you direct them to him. All right. And we will make the appropriate changes going forward. I kid. Welcome to the show on a full-time capacity. And thank you for everything that you already have done and the continuation of Luis Aguilar and what he does to help make us look good on a weekly basis. We will be back again next week at the same time. We appreciate and thank all of you for taking the time each week to download and to subscribe and to review and to do all the different things that you do. And until next week, as always, size the day. You like that clip? Well, my State of the Union podcast drops every week. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.